There is an old story that when you go on a job interview, the first question they ask is, do you know how to use Excel? Of course, most people say yes. And then the second question is, do you know how to use pivot tables? And that question is a little harder to answer. Pivot tables are perhaps the most powerful feature of Excel, and many people consider them difficult. But if you approach them the right way, if you play with them, they are actually pretty easy and a lot of fun. But first, a word from our sponsor. Actually, we don't have any sponsors, but if you find this video helpful, we do ask that you click the like button and the subscribe button. That will be very helpful for us to be able to make more of these videos for you in the future. If you want to join in our fun, be sure to download the free Excel workbook we have created. Just click the link in the description below. If you are new to pivot tables, you might be wondering, what exactly are we talking about here? A pivot table is basically a powerful and easy to use tool for converting simple data into useful information. It takes data or a simple list of facts and slices and dices that data into useful information, knowledge that we can use to make decisions. Pivot tables have a reputation for being an advanced topic, something we should hide from beginning Excel users. Maybe, but you tell me. I'm going to show you how to insert a pivot table, and you tell me how difficult it is. Here in our workbook, we've got a simple list of expenses, some typical expenses that someone might have. And we want to analyze this, see if we can draw any conclusions. All I'm going to do is just click someplace in the table. It could be any cell, as long as the table has no blank rows, no blank columns, and only one row of labels at the top. All we need to do is click one cell in that table. We'll go up to the Insert tab. We're going to click on Recommended Pivot Tables. There's only one recommendation, so all we need to do is just click the OK button, and there's our pivot table. It tells us right away the expenses for each of the 4 different categories we have. That's pretty nice, but let's make it a little bit better. Over on the right side, you see we have pivot table fields. This is a list of the 4 columns we had before. In the database world, they call columns fields. So, all right. And down here, we've got a bunch of boxes. You can see expenses in the rows box, and sum of amount is in the values box. What we're going to do now is we're going to grab this date here, date column or date field, and just drag it and put it into the columns box. Did you see what happened there? We've sliced and diced our data. Now we can see how much we spent for each category for each month. Amazing. And we did that with what? With one mouse click. Now I'm going to undo that. And I'm going to undo that again. There we go. Go back to where we were. Okay, now what I'm going to do is I'm going to take expense and grab that and put it into the columns box. Okay, so now our table's a little different. Then I'm going to grab months, or actually put date, and move that into the rows box. And look at that. You see what we just did? We pivoted the table. And that's why they call it a pivot table. And we did that with what? We did that with 3 mouse clicks. Now let's use pivot tables to do a little more advanced analysis. In our workbook, we're going to go to our sales sheet. And if we scroll down, you can see we have a list of transactions here. We have the date, we have the salesperson, the customer, the product, and the amount for each of the transactions. And we want to find out various things. Which is our best salesperson? Who's our best customer? Which product is doing best? And we can do that with pivot tables. Again, all we need to do is click in the table here. As long as we have no blank rows, no blank columns, and only one row of labels at the top, we can just click any cell in our table. And this time we're going to do it a little differently than we did before. We're again going to go to the Insert tab. We're going to click on this time the Pivot Table button, top part of the pivot table button, and a little dialog box comes up, and it just basically confirms the area, the range of cells that we want to look at, which is fine. And then it asks us where we want to put the new pivot table. It's going to put it onto a new worksheet, which is exactly where we want. So all we need to do is just click on the OK button. We have a new sheet called Sheet 3. And if you notice on the left side, we have a little design here, which is where our pivot table is eventually going to go. And over on the right side, we have a pane here, which has the pivot table fields. And remember, fields are just columns. In the database world, they call columns fields. And here's a list of the columns right here. We've got a bunch of boxes down at the bottom, and we can disregard the filters box. We're only going to look at the columns, the rows, and the values box. And all we need to do is just drag these columns or fields into the appropriate boxes. Let's start by taking salesperson and just drag that into the rows box. And now we have a list of our salespeople. Okay, now we can take amount and drag it into the values box. And we have the sum of amount. We can see how much each of our salespersons sold over the period of time. Interesting. But now watch this. We can take product and drag that into the columns box. And we can see how much of each product each of our salesperson did. And that was just like a couple of mouse clicks. An amazing, amazing amount of information there. Okay, and we can see a lot of other things too. We can take product, move it over here, just get rid of it. And we'll put date in there. We'll actually put month. We'll grab month and put it into the columns box. And now we can see how each of the salespeople did for each month. Interesting. Okay, good. And we could take salesperson out and then put customer into the rows box here. And we can see how much each of our customer did for each month. Okay, all this information we can find out just by dragging and dropping the different columns into the different boxes at the bottom. And you can see we can find out an awful lot of stuff just by moving things around. This is the power of the pivot table. Now we're going to do some really important analysis. We're going to pretend we're in the HR department of a company. We want to be sure that we're paying everybody fairly. We'll go to the salary sheet. And if you scroll down, you can see we have a list of the people working for our company. We can see their names, what gender they are, how many years they've been working for us, what department they're in, and their salary. And we've had reports from some of the women that they're not being paid as much as the men. And we want to make sure that that's not possible, because if that's true, then we could be in serious trouble. So we want to make sure everybody's being paid fairly here. So what we'll do is we'll just create a pivot table. We'll click someplace inside the table. It can be any cell. Well, again, we'll go up to the Insert tab, click on the top part of the pivot table button. Again, a dialog box comes up and just confirms the range of cells that we're interested in and says, okay, new worksheet, which is exactly what we want. We'll just click the OK button. Again, we have a design here on the new sheet, a little design. We have the fields over here. And what we're going to do is we're going to take gender, grab it and drag it into the rows box. I'm going to take salary and put it into the values box. And you can see now we have the sum of salary for the men and for the women. Well, that's interesting for the accountants, but we don't want the sum of the salary. We want to see the average salary. We want to compare the average female salary versus the average male salary. So we'll just go up here, and how do we change it? Well, we'll just right-click one of these numbers, and we'll go down here to Summarize Values By and change it to Average. And look at that. All right, well, we got these strange numbers, so let's fix the formatting. Again, we can just right-click it, right-click and go down to Number Format. Click on that, and then we can just go to, say, number. And we don't care about pennies in this case. We'll get rid of the decimal places, but we do care about commas. And we'll put in the OK button. And you can see now that we do have a little discrepancy here. The men are making a little bit more money on average. Let's see if there's a real problem here. Let's analyze this a little further. Let's take department and put department into the columns box. And you can see, interesting, in the creative department, there's not much difference between the two. Wow, that's pretty close. In the sales department, the females are actually making a little bit more than the men. And in the maintenance, we have a pretty big discrepancy in the maintenance department there. So we might want to take a look at that. Now let's change this table here. We usually like to have a table in a vertical format. So again, we're going to pivot it. I'm going to take department, just grab department and just drag it into the rows box. Take gender and drag that up into the columns box. And we've just pivoted the table in just 2 mouse clicks. Interesting. Now you might say, well, why is there a difference between the men and the women? Well, one possibility is seniority. The men might have been here working longer. So let's take a look at that. We have our data here. We can grab years and just put it underneath the department. Okay, and now we can see, in each department, we compare year by year how people are being paid. And you can see in our maintenance department, there's a little discrepancy here, the 28,000 for females versus 32,000. That's a pretty big difference here for new people coming into the company there. Something we could look at, and we'll take a look at that a little bit later. But you can see here, by just using the mouse click, we can see the differences here. And you can see, well, possibly one of the problems is we've got these men here who have no female counterparts, so they're making a pretty good amount of money. So that may explain a lot why there's such a big difference in the maintenance department. A little bit later, we'll try to fix that. And now let's see if we can make our pivot tables look a little nicer. There are a couple of things we can do to make a pivot table look better. We'll go to the fine-tuning sheet in our workbook. If we scroll down, you can see we have 2 pivot tables here, which look familiar. And let's fix these up. Okay, first thing that I notice here is we've got these headings here, column labels and row labels. Well, we already know they're columns and we know they're rows. This doesn't give us a lot of information. Let's see if we can improve upon this. If we click inside the pivot table, click any place inside the pivot table fields pane appears over on the right side. And we also have 2 new tabs at the top with pivot table analyze and design. If we click in the design tab and go over here to the left, we see a button here called report layout. If we click on report layout, one of the options is show in outline form. And if we click on that, look at that. Now we have meaningful titles there at the top, which looks a whole lot better. Let's go down a little bit here to the second table here. We'll do the same thing. We'll just click inside the table. We'll go up and click in the design tab, and way over on the left, we'll click on the remote layout button, report layout button, and we'll choose outline form. And again, we have meaningful titles there at the top of our columns and rows. Now, if we go back on the first one here, we do have this extra thing, date. Now, we don't really need date here. We have month. If we wanted to look at individual days of the month, we could do that, but that doesn't make any sense. So this doesn't provide a lot of information. So if we go over here into if we click inside our table, and you see we've got the date column here, and then we got the format, the months column here. We can just get rid of this one here. We just uncheck it and it goes away a little bit tighter. That looks pretty nice. Now, some of the labels in the cells are a bit awkward here, like some of them out. Let's fix that. Now, we can't edit it directly, but I can type over it. So I can type in here, we'll put in total sales. And if we go down here to the next one here, we have average salary, okay? Average salary, average of salary. Well, that doesn't make any sense. Let's change that. And again, we can't edit it, but I can type over it. I can say average salaries. That's better. Another thing I like to do is center the labels on top of each of the columns here. Center the labels. Right now, they're kind of on the left side. Their numbers are on the right, so let's move them over there. We're going to do just center them. Go into the Home tab. Just click the center button to center them. That's nice. And we'll do the same thing here in the second table. Just select these 3 cells. We'll go up here, click on the center button. There we go. Looks like they're a little tight here in this column here, so I'm just going to widen this column out a little bit, make it fit better. There we go. Okay, and one final thing here, we've got these blank cells here, which is because zeros. There are no sales for apricots in March and June. Well, let's fix that. It'd be that instead of a blank, it'd be better to see an actual 0. Let's fix that. We're going to right-click any cell in the table, any cell, and we're going to go to Pivot Table Options. Pivot Table Options. There we go. And what we'll do on the first tab here, Layout and Format. We'll go down here, and you can see there's an option here for 4 empty cells show nothing. Let's put a 0 in there. Just put like type of 0. That's all. And we just hit the OK button, and that's much better. Okay, there we go. We fixed up our tables. They look a little bit better now. Our pivot tables look pretty good now, but a better way to present our data may be to use a chart. And as it turns out, it is extremely easy to create a pivot chart. If we scroll down on the chart sheet of our workbook, you can see we have 2 nice pivot tables here. Let's present this data in a better way. Now, if we click inside the first pivot table, we can see that we created this by putting product into the columns box and months into the rows box. And this tells us the sales by month for each of the products. It looks pretty nice as the table, but let's create a chart to present this information in a better way. Now watch how easy this is. Okay, I click one cell in the table, could be any cell in the table. I go up to the Pivot Table Analyze tab at the top there, Pivot Table Analyze tab, and I click, and there's a big button there. Click this button here, the Pivot Chart button. I just click on that, and I get a whole bunch of different charts. It goes first to the clustered column chart, but it's a little too much information for a clustered column chart. So I'm going to go and click on the line chart option here, and that looks a little better. That looks a little cleaner. All we need is a simple 2-dimensional chart, which is fine, and we can just go down here and click on the OK button, and we have a chart. That looks pretty good, except we have these little gray areas here. These are for filtering our data, but we don't want to filter anything, and it looks a little bit unsightly, so let's get rid of those. If we go up to the Pivot Chart Analyze tab, over on the right side is a button there, 2 parts. If we click on the top part of the Field Buttons button, click on the top part of that, it gets rid of those buttons, which works really nicely. Okay, let's scroll down and look at the other table here. Okay, this would be nice to present this as a table. it would be nice to present this as a chart. And again, click any place inside the table. We'll go up to the Pivot Table Analyze tab. We'll click on the big Pivot Chart button. And in this case, a clustered column chart is pretty good. So we'll just go with that and we'll click on the OK button. And that's what we have. And again, we have those gray buttons. Let's get rid of those in the Pivot Chart Analyze tab. We'll go over here on the right and again, click the top part of the Field Buttons button and they go away. And that's our pivot charts. I told you, pretty easy, right? Now, pivot tables are powerful. They are easy to use, but there is one thing you have to watch out for. If we go to the Be Careful sheet in our workbook and we scroll down, you can see we have, again, 2 pivot tables here. And in our first pivot table here, we've got the sales analysis. And you notice we have the zero amounts. There were no apricots sold in March. Well, it turns out that was a mistake. Okay, we have greater than usual sales in April. And it turns out one of the sales in April really should have been marked for March. So let's change that. Let's go up here and just see which sales are involved. If we double click on the 350 here, just double click on it, that creates a new sheet. And if we click away to see it, let's expand column A so we can see the dates better. And you can see we have 2 sales in April, and one of those should have been for March. The one for April 3rd should have been March 3rd. Now, we can't make the change here. This is just showing us the data. So if we make a change here, it's not going to affect anything. We have to go back to the original data to do that. So if we go down and click on the sales sheet here, and we'll go down, scroll down to the date April 3rd. Here we go there. We're just going to change this date here from April 3rd to March 3rd. 3/3, hit the Enter key. There, good. We changed it. Now that sale is now going to be in March. And if we go back into our Be Careful sheet, you can see, whoops, there's no change. Okay, this is one of the problems with, this is the major problem with pivot tables. If you make any changes in your data, okay, unlike charts, unlike other formulas, it doesn't automatically update. You have to refresh it manually. How do you do that? It's fairly simple, okay? Just right-click any cell in the table. Right-click any cell in the table and choose refresh. There we go. And now we get good results, okay? If we go down into the second sheet here, if we go down into the second workbook here, if we go down into the second pivot table here, you can see we have our discrepancy here. In the maintenance department, the females, new female workers are getting only 28,000 versus the men making 32,000. So we have to even that out. Let's see who's involved here. If we double click on the 28,000, you can see there's only one person here, Cindy, who's making 28,000. Okay, so now again, we can't make the change here. We have to go back to the original data. So we'll go to our salary sheet. We'll click on the salary sheet. And if we scroll down, there's Cindy right there. She's making 28,000 here, so we can just change that from 28. Let's give her 32,000. We'll increase that to 32,000. Real nice. All right, good. So let's go back to the Be Careful sheet, and you can see there it is, and no change. Again, we have to refresh the pivot table. Right-click any cell, go to refresh. There we go. So just remember, whenever your data changes, be sure to refresh your pivot tables. So far, we've been using dummy data. For homework, let's use pivot tables on some real data. And since our goal here is to play with pivot tables, let's play a game. Well, not exactly play a game, but we can analyze one. If you go to the tennis sheet on our workbook, you can see we have a list of 500 top women's tennis champions as of July 2022. And if you scroll down, you can see there's quite a few people here, quite a few people. Now let's see how we can analyze this data. One thing that might be interesting is to see how many players there are from each country. The largest number is probably from the US, but which country would be second, third, or fourth? Let's use a pivot table to find out. We'll just click any place in the table. Again, there's no blank rows, no blank columns, only one row labels at the top. So we can just go up to the Insert tab, click on the top part of the pivot table button, and we're going to put it on a new sheet. So we just click the OK button. We have our little design on the left side, and we have our fields or columns on the right, and then the boxes here. Let's just grab region, put that into the rows box. And what do we put in values? Well, we'll just take region again, put that into the values there again. It doesn't matter which one we put, and automatically it does a count because there's no numbers in the region column. And as you can see, it gives us the numbers for each of the countries. Okay, let's sort it. Let's right click any one of these cells. We'll go sort largest to smallest. And look at that, the USA, yes, indeed, is the number one country here, but Russia's number 2, France 3rd, Czechoslovakia 4th. Then we have Italy, Romania, Spain, and Japan. Another thing you might want to see is how many players there are at each age level. This would tell us what the peak age is for women tennis players. And the answer is not surprising, but I will leave that for you to find out as homework. So have some fun with it. We've had a lot of fun with pivot tables. We've analyzed sales data to find our best salesperson and best customer. We've looked at salaries and helped to make them equal for men and women. We've fine-tuned pivot tables for possible use in presentations. We've created some pivot charts. We've looked at the main problem with pivot tables, and we've even found the best countries for women's tennis champions. But there's one more thing, and this one is a lot of fun. Slicers. What is a slicer? Well, the best way to describe a slicer is just to see one in action. Let's go to the chart sheet in our. Let's go back to the chart sheet in our workbook. And it looks a bit crowded here. Let's make some room here. We're going to zoom out, go back down to about 100%. And let's make our chart here a little smaller. I'll just grab the corners, bring it up a little bit, maybe a little bit more. And we'll move it up here into the corner above our pivot table. There we go. Okay, good. I'm going to click either in the table or in the chart, doesn't matter which one. And I'm going to go up here to the Pivot Table Analyze tab. And in the Pivot Table Analyze tab, there's a button called Insert Slicer. So let's click on that. And you can see there's a bunch of possible slicers here. Let's choose the product one. We're going to click on the checkbox for product and we'll click OK. And there's our slicer. Now what I'm going to do is just reduce the size here a little bit, cut down and just trim it a little bit. And I'll move it up about here. There we go. Okay, what does it do? Well, let's click it and find out. I'm going to click apples. Okay, and I'll click apricots. And I'll click cherries and oranges. And you can see what it is. It's a filter. And I could also click on apples, hold down the control key, click on bananas, hold down the control key, and click on strawberries. And now I have a chart for 3 products. So what the slicer is this amazing filter tool. Just by clicking buttons, you could filter your data and look at only the things that you want to look at. Amazing, isn't it? So now you know how powerful pivot tables are, and you know how easy they are to use, right? Now be sure to practice pivot tables on your own data. And when you go for a job interview and they ask you, do you know how to use pivot tables? You can say, yes, of course. If you found this video helpful, please click the like button and the subscribe button. That will help us be able to make more of these videos for you in the future. Thanks for watching.